We'll take a closer look now at writing a good research question. It may seem like it's simple, but it's often the hardest part of preparing a clinical trial. What is the question or questions that you desire to answer? Before we get started, make sure that you have prepared yourself by looking at the assessment that was outlined right before this video. So make sure you have the piece of paper to diagram your own research question. This will be a solo activity, but it should be geared towards the theme area of your final team project. It does not have to be the same question of your grant, but just keep that in mind. So make sure you have that blank sheet of paper in front of you so that you can follow along with diagramming your own research question. So we'll talk today about the basics of diagramming a research question, the action, the who, the what, and the when. And these are all things that you need to have specified before you can start planning your clinical trial. Very basically, you'll start with the intervention and the outcome. When an investigator meets with us to talk about planning their clinical trial, so they often come to us and say, I need power and sample size. And when I say us, I mean a biostatistician, an epidemiologist, a clinical trialist, to help them plan. And we'll say, what's your question? And 20 minutes later, we still don't have a specific question. So oftentimes it would be something like, well, I'd like to see if my intervention can improve walking in participants with Parkinson's. Okay, so we have their intervention, be it a drug or an exercise intervention, perhaps it's nutritional, maybe it's physical therapy, what have you. So they've defined maybe specifically their intervention. But the second part of it is the outcome. I want to see if it improves walking. Well, improves, okay, so that's good. You want to see if it's better. Better how? Is it better in distance? Is it better in speed? Is it better that they don't need assistance with walking? If it's better in distance, is it the time that they're walking a specified distance, or is it simply letting them walk for a specified minute and seeing how far they can walk? Are they allowed to take breaks? So the walking or the improvement in walking has to be very specific. So we'll start here with an intervention and our outcome. Start with those two things and put the intervention of your choice in the intervention section on your piece of paper and the outcome of your choice on the outcome section. Then we get to the action. So pick an action. We have our intervention and we have our outcome. How is the intervention going to affect that outcome? In the example before, the question was improvement. So what do you hope to see if this intervention works? What are the options? Improves. Improves can mean something increases, so a score gets better. It could be that something decreases. They're able to walk faster. It could be something is reduced. Generally in clinical trials, we're not looking at things getting worse. So our questions tend to be one-sided in that we're looking for an improvement. Now, if this is an early stage clinical trial, we may simply be looking for differences in the study. So you could be looking at, we see a different rate of something in group A versus group B, or you'll be looking at group A to be better than group B. So what is your action? What do you hope to see? So add the action to the specified location on your worksheet. So your action will connect your intervention to your outcome. Is your action going to be greater than, better than? Sometimes something being better is actually a lower score or a faster time. So make sure you specify the direction of that improvement. What does it mean for someone to get better? So now who are we considering in our research question? So think about the example. We want to improve walking. Our intervention improves walking in persons with Parkinson's disease. So you'll need to specify your disease group or your interventional group. Who is going to be in your study? And what are the qualifiers of that? So think about the adjectives when you go back to diagramming a sentence way back in elementary school grammar class. What were those adjectives? And we want to make some qualifiers for our disease group. In this case, those will be known more broadly as your inclusion criteria and your exclusion criteria. So we're looking for a group that is somewhat similar in nature, so we can make sure the effect is based on the disease and the intervention relationship. In our example, it would be our intervention improves walking for Parkinson's. Our disease group is Parkinson's, and our qualifiers may be something like early onset Parkinson's. So that may be an age group. So they have to be younger than the age of 40. Your qualifier could be a certain disease length. So it could be 3 years. Since we're looking to improve walking, we would want to definitely have people who are still mobile, right? So if they're wheelchair bound, we may not be able to improve their walking. So they may have to be mobile in some way. Do they have to be mobile without assistance? So think about all the qualifiers of the disease group that you would want. These are your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So for your specific example, jot down a few qualifiers. The list does not need to be exhaustive here. So now that we know the basics, the action, the who, now we have to get to the what. So outcome versus measure. We said here improves walking. Sometimes the outcome and the measurement are the same. So systolic blood pressure. You could want to improve systolic blood pressure. The measure that you take is your outcome measure. But sometimes the outcome is assessed with a measurement. So you might be looking at high blood pressure that's persistent over a long period of time. And persistent high blood pressure can be measured as a systolic blood pressure greater than 120 or diastolic blood pressure greater than 90. And it could be in the face of taking a number of medications for more than a certain period of time. So that gets again into your qualifiers. Make sure that you understand the difference between outcome and the measurement. So in a multiple sclerosis survey, the outcome is relapse, perhaps if you're looking at relapsing remitting. Defining a relapse, and those examples are up on Canvas, defining a relapse takes multiple measurements to determine whether or not someone has actually had a clinically defined event. So make sure you understand the difference between your outcome and your measurement. Here, our outcome is improvement in walking, and we have to decide how are we going to measure that. So now add to your diagram the measurement. We have our intervention improving walking in our Parkinson's group, defined as perhaps early onset Parkinson's in participants that are still mobile. And we'll be measuring that by a timed 25-foot walk. So we'll really be looking for that timed 25-foot walk to be faster, to get faster. Now, what do we mean by faster? So there are a couple of ways in that instance that you could define faster. Faster could be a 2-second reduction in 25 feet. It could be a 10% reduction. And then your measurement goes from seconds to a categorical measure, right? So you've measured the time in seconds and you're comparing it back to baseline time and you want to see if it's improved by some measure. So that measurement will then help directly lead you to your statistical analysis. If we're strictly looking for a reduction in time, that would be a continuous outcome measure. If you're looking for a change in status, a 10% reduction in time, that becomes a categorical measure, and that will determine the type of analysis that you have. There's a saying in clinical trials that design leads to analysis. So before you can begin to plan your study, you really have to have this measurement and your outcome and your primary outcome specified so that it is clear if a participant has met the outcome. We've gone through the basics, the action, the who, the what, and now we have to define the when. And that's the timing of your intervention and the duration of follow-up. So we have our intervention, our outcome, our action, our disease group with the qualifiers, and our measurement or measurements. And now we need to define the follow-up time. The crux of a randomized controlled clinical trial is that you do an intervention and then you have a follow-up measure. So you have measurements pre-intervention at baseline or month 0 or time 0. You do the intervention, and sometimes the intervention is a drug, and that's over multiple months or even years. Sometimes it's a surgical intervention. So the intervention in and of itself is a short time period, but the follow-up can then be a week, 4 weeks, 10 weeks. If you're looking at long-term chronic diseases, the follow-up time can be years. If you are looking at premature babies, infants, follow-up time may only be a few days or weeks. So really have a concept of the duration of time that you can follow people and the duration of time that would be meaningful to the disease group. So if it's a long-term chronic illness, following participants for a matter of weeks may not be the right time frame. Whereas if it is premature infants, following them for years may also not be the right time frame. The time frame also is going to circle back around to your measurement of interest. Is that measurement likely to change in the time that you have to follow them up? It's a short health form 12 questionnaire. They are slow to change. These are global or broad assessments of quality of life. And if you look at participants with long-term chronic diseases, you may not see a change even within a year. Or a meaningful change in that type of measurement. So doing a 6-week follow-up with the SF-12 is probably not your correct outcome measurement. So make sure that you understand the measure. How quick is it to change? What is a meaningful change? And what type of follow-up time will you need for that measure? And this is it. This is diagramming your research question. Start with your intervention and your outcome. Add the action you're looking to see, your disease group, the qualifiers for that disease group, how are you measuring the outcome, and for how long. And that gets you to the crux of the design stage of your clinical trial. Once you have a specifically defined research question, you can then bring data to bear on that question to answer it.